I'd like to entertain a motion for the adoption of the minutes from 11/18/14. Motion for that.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Mass. Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Any discussion? Mrs. Mass?
I voted no. I didn't abstain on all three of the minutes on the first page there. It says I abstained. I voted no on all minutes. And will continue to do so until we change them. Or take.
Celeste, we have that corrected? Thank you. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Okay, moving on to item 5, superintendent's update and comments.
Thank you. I'd like to begin with a few notes about the agenda. If the board would, I recommend for policy number 9230. It was a first reading for tonight, and I believe we need further consultation with our school district attorney regarding some of the suggested changes to that policy. So we will bring that back at our next board meeting, following our next policy meeting, which I believe is January 7th. Also, on the civil service staff agenda, item 7.2, B2, under retirement, resignation, and termination, I'd like to pull that item as well. That being said, just so that the public understands, because the question was asked, at a previous meeting, our attorney Warren Richmond did attend the town board meeting about the Windwatch Towers and spoke in opposition to the project. At the conclusion of the hearing, the board approved the change from the previously approved 150 condo units to 150 rental units. I do want the board to know that yesterday I received a phone call from a Mr. Scully from the DEC, and he called to let me know that they would really like to reach out to the board and the community if they felt, the board felt there was a need to explain the status of the landfill behind Whippoorwill here, and the idea that they wanted to extend information earlier, but were requested by the district attorney's office to not release a lot of information, but now they are free to release. While the investigation was going on of the whole landfill, and as you could see in Newsday, that resulted this week in people, I believe, being indicted. And so he was to email me information that I would then share with the board. I have not received that email yet, but I'll send that information home in the weekly update, which, according to him, gives us specific information about the capacity of the landfill, how full it is. I believe there are two sites, one is full and one is 75% full already, and once it is completely full, they cap the site in perpetuity. But I will forward that information to you when I receive it. I want to congratulate our girls cross country, our varsity football, our JV football, and our varsity girls swim team, all of whom received recognition for sportsmanship from Section 11 during this fall season. Likewise, I'd like to congratulate Danny Smith, who is a senior in our high school. He received the VFW Voice of Democracy first place contest winner. It was an oratory contest, and Danny, if you don't know him, is one of our very engaged and outstanding theater students. In Newsday, some of you may have read that we received some good news from the teachers' retirement system, and that is that our current contributions to the retirement system, someone's got the article this year, are at 17.53% of salary for those employees in the TRS system. We have been told that next year our contributions will go down to between 13 and 13.5% of salaries for the TRS. Now, while that sounds wonderful and like a windfall, and indeed it is really good news for us, we do also have to balance it and remember that it is our anticipation that our tax cap this year is going to be lower than it's been in the past. So it could be that we've received good news that will help us balance out our budget. And we'll be giving you, obviously, more information on that once we're able to calculate what our tax cap will be when planning our 15-16 school district budget. I also want to mention to the board and to the public that the planning of the 2015-16 calendar is very difficult this year for school districts across New York State. Upstate, it's an issue because of the testing schedule that New York State has put out and when they want us to give our assessments. They have traditional spring break 1 week in April. So for them it's difficult in that respect. But here on Long Island and in the greater metropolitan area, we have a calendar where we have the latest Labor Day possible. It is the 7th of September. And that is in conjunction with the fact that there are 3 school days off in January for the Jewish holidays. So, in trying to fit in the number of days that we need instructionally for students.
January?
Did I say January?
Yeah.
September.
I'm like,
I don't know why I said January. I'm rushing the calendar. September. There are 3 of the, could you reverse the videotape? I'll repeat that. In September. So that makes it really difficult for us to plan a calendar. What we've been waiting for, and I just got it yesterday, was the BOCES template for their school calendar, because we do try and line up with BOCES because we have a number of students that attend BOCES schools, and we want to be open when their schools are open. I have already received phone calls from community residents asking what the calendar is because people are starting to plan vacations at this time. I just want the board to know that we will get a recommended calendar to you as soon as we possibly can once we have all of the information that we need, including confirmed dates from the state for testing, our testing program. And that being said, I just want to wish everybody, the board and the community, the most wonderful, happy, blessed, and joy-filled holiday season. So enjoy your time with your family and your friends.
Thank you. At this time, the board would entertain questions from the community on tonight's agenda only. If you do have questions, I ask that you be acknowledged and then step to the podium, use the microphone, and state your name. So are there any questions?
I guess at this point, oh, sorry, Kirsten Rusfield. And I guess at this point it's more of a comment than a question. The IB program for design and technology that had been presented as a possibility, I notice is not on the agenda, but only the business classes. And I find that very disappointing.
Comment? Would you like me to comment on that?
Yes, please.
I will comment on that. We had a discussion with Mr. Eschbach and Mrs. O'Connor, our high school principal. You may have known those were recommended courses before but in discussing them, I need to let you know, Kirsten, that the IB business course is there because of the huge enrollment that we have in that program, and we're trying to accommodate our students who use that particular course to fulfill the 6th area of the full IB complement, you know, the social, you know what I mean. Okay, so instead of taking an art, a visual arts or performing arts, they will take the business IB. And so that is why that is being recommended. There was a concern with the other course that bumps into the science requirement. And right now, I believe we need to take a step back and look at the science courses that we're offering in IB, because we're starting to splinter our students in so many directions, at so many levels, and so many different science offerings. What I do not want to do is have our students apply for colleges with anything less than a strong, full, I love 4 years of science for every student, kind of a program. So I just believe that rather than offer another course right now that may move kids out of that science section, that we really need the time to look at what we are offering, which is physics, higher level, NSL, we're offering, I'm looking at Christine, chemistry, higher level, and SL, life science, higher level, and SL, environmental science, we're offering. So I think we need to look at it more closely.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on to the consent agenda. Do any board members have any items they would like to sever from the consent agenda? Rob?
Gary, it would be 7. James. 7.2 C6. Oh, 7.3, I apologize. C6. 7.4B. And then 7.4D, all 4, but I can take it one.
Yeah, we'll be taking this. Any other board members have anything to like to say? Mrs. Michaels?
I would just like to, on 7.4D,
Pull out 3?
yeah.
Yes, sir. You okay with leaving 1, 2, and 4? Mr. Kravitz?
7.4, 2 and 3, A, 2 and 3.
7.4A, 2, and
Actually, going back, sorry, because we're
3.
7.2, sorry, 7.3, B2.
B2?
B2,
Weather
weather.
code?
And 7.3, C6.
It's already said.
Oh, C9.
C9? Okay. Any others?
That's it.
The other board members have anything they'd like to say? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion for the consent agenda excluding items 7.2B2, 7.3C6, 7.3C9, 7.4A2 and 3, 7.4B, 7.4D, 1 through 4. That's it. Do I have a motion? Okay, thank you, Ms. Macaluso. Have a second. Ms. Crawford, any discussion? All in favor?
Oh. I do have a question.
Sure.
If we're doing a lot of removal of consent agenda, my question is, if these are, and just my comment, I should say, if these are just questions that need to be asked about those, well, I'm assuming then that everyone who's asking questions about it may vote no because of an answer to the question. Is that, am I correct in assuming?
I don't have a way of knowing that.
No,
other
we
to-
don't. So, because if you're
Other
just
other
asking
than
a
to
question.
restate what you just said, if you only need to ask a question, it doesn't need to be severed. It
Okay.
has to be asked at this point
Thank you.
on a non-severed item.
Okay.
Or sent to me ahead of time, and I did not receive any questions for this board meeting, just so the board's aware.
Okay, thank you.
We had a motion, we had a second discussion. All in favor? Moving on to the severed items, I'd like to entertain a motion for 7.2B2. Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Second. Mrs. Kiley. Discussion.
So, weather bug, I know in the past, it's more of a, comes up on computer programs as like spyware, malware. What is it exactly are they using this for? Is this going to be on every computer in the science classroom?
And I'm not an expert in this, honestly, but this is a grant that was submitted to the Hauppauge Education Foundation by Rob Montmuller from the science department. And he was requesting this so that our students, actually at all levels, can get engaged in forecasting of weather and sending it into the program. I believe it's affiliated with one of the TV stations, is it not? And working with the scientific instruments that predict the weather.
Mrs. Mann?
So this is going to be paid for by the Hauppauge Educational Foundation, and we're just approving the contract?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to approve the contract because we're going to accept the equipment?
Correct.
So, but the Hauppauge Educational Foundation is paying for it?
Correct.
And so it shouldn't say a donation of the equipment from the Hauppauge?
We did that at a previous meeting.
Oh, you did?
We did.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was accepted at a previous meeting.
It was accepted?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And this is just the official contract.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Scarito?
The only question I had on the weather bug was, I know I think it's a $600 annual charge to keep renewing. When I was with CAP, I thought we only give a 1 year, what they call
Yeah, that's generally what the Education Foundation does, is they give the startup money, the seed money. Then we use the program. If it's something we'd like to continue, we see if we can fit it into our budget. If not, obviously, we wouldn't place it in the budget for next year.
But by then we'd have the equipment on top of the high school, correct?
Correct.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. I can entertain a motion for 7.3C6.
So
Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Second. Any discussion?
Who was the second?
Jim? Any discussion? Mr. Scarito?
I apologize, these pages always, but it's the next to last page. The vendor number is 1420. And the check number is 3106, if that helps you, James, next to last. Yes, correct. The checks that are, I guess it's one check, it says Clerk of Works, it looks like for Pines, Forest Brook, and the Hauppauge High School because of the roof. I think one is almost $18,000. Is that included when we did the roof replacement? Is that just broken down? Or is that an extra charge that I'm aware of?
All of these costs are built into the budgets of capital projects. So, for example, the roof, I believe, the budget was estimated at $900,000. That
Right.
included not only the fee for the architect, but the fee for school construction
That's
consultants.
included.
That's included, yes.
Any other questions?
I know I've mentioned this before, but to get this whole big warrant, it just makes, it doesn't make any sense to me. I know everything is listed by check number. Is there a way we could, I guess, I don't know, organize it more by the type of work that's being done, or what type of check that is being cut, instead of going by check number? So if you have, like, let's say the Verizon wireless bill, you have all that together, any construction on one page, you know? Just going by check number, it's kind of cumbersome.
What we can do is we can take a look at the software and see, maybe we can drop it in Excel and sort it by account code or description, which groups some of the things together. We can play around with it and see what the system will allow us to do. Unfortunately, in the current version of Finance Manager that we're on, sometimes it lets us throw reports into Excel, sometimes it doesn't. There is a new version coming out, which much greater user usability. So hopefully that would have something if this doesn't. But we'll play around with it, work with IT and see if there's maybe a different way we can sort it.
Be more helpful.
But before we do that, we would have to know exactly what it is the board is interested in seeing and how.
Well, instead of grouping it by check number, which is consecutive check number, it would just be nice to group it by
Vendor?
vendor. Well, maybe not even vendor, because same vendors will do different types of work, right? I guess type of work, you know.
Is there a parameter on the sheet that you would recommend sorting by?
Maybe by account description, a check description, that would be a little bit.
Mrs. Vance.
If I can make a suggestion, if it's possible, I mean, to put it, you guys maybe don't know the codes out of the budget yet, and that maybe it would be helpful if the budget codes, in other words, if you get the budget code, what the content, if you want to call it that way, that sheet that you give us with the budget, James, that lists what budget line it's coming out of and what budget area its budget code is coming out of. If that's on the front of it, when you look at it, then you'll know it's coming out of what area of the budget.
I mean, even by
Would
check
that be
description.
helpful? But that's what I'm saying, then you'll know it's coming out of the construction end.
Yeah, maybe you could add
Then
another
you know
line.
it's coming out of what line.
Let me just clarify, check description is not really check description, that's the account code description. So that's why you'll see the first one, 9060.8000, it says health insurance. That's the title of the account code and budget, that's not the check description. So we can see if we can sort it by those descriptions. I'm not sure how it would work with the different vendors, check numbers and such. We can see if we can try to sort it by there. What I can say is we can play around, see what functionality, if any, our current software has, and if not, we can inquire with the vendor to see maybe the new version will have something that's a little easier for everybody to take a look at.
It'd be nice if they just grouped.
Yeah, unfortunately, some reports the finance manager have great usability and we can function and we can sort by however we like, we can alter filter and whatnot. In other reports, we can't even drop in Excel. It really depends on the report, but we can take a look and see what we can do.
Any other questions? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes 6-0. Item 73C9, ECAP. Motion. Mrs. Kylie, second. Thank you, Mr. Garrido. Discussion.
Yes, this is what I brought up again, I think it might have been last meeting. With just an example, just no mental comment ahead, Forest Brook field trip, we have $9,000 in that account. Do we decide exactly what we do with that money? Is that going towards a field trip? Is that going for the next 5, the future years? And that's just using that because I don't.
Yep. And I know we've talked about this ECAP quite a bit, and we've discussed it at the audit committee quite a bit as well. The plan that we do have for these funds, I've spoken to each of the elementary principals about the different field trip accounts and their GO or student council accounts, and needing to develop plans for the use of that money. What we do plan to do is when each of the clubs submits their charters for reauthorization for the next year, which the board should receive sometime late spring, to act on. We're also going to ask each group to submit a plan for the money that they're carrying over, so we can really start to sort out, what is remaining, what is earmarked, what is not, and really what it will do is it will provide an opportunity for the students in the group who should be making these financial decisions about these club monies, really push them to start thinking about what to do. This is how much money we have. What is our long-term plan for this money? Not to go out and spend it, on anything, but really to develop a plan, work to a goal, and then spend it for the benefit of the buildings, the students.
Okay, so for this year then, and so we don't carry over $9,000 especially. Okay, and I'm looking at Forest Brook field trip is 91. What are we doing this year with that money?
Well, I believe a large portion, speaking with the Forest Brook principal last night, I believe a large portion of this money is related to the 5th grade board, not brokerage, not all of it, but a large portion, the coach buses, the tickets, the restaurant. I believe they've been collecting money for this trip, if if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And that's where it's deposited. So I need to really break down with her how much is going towards that trip and how much is really truly left over. I think it will also be easier for us. We're in the process of transitioning these field trip accounts to the business office. Currently, they're being managed in the building, but the business office will be taking over the accounting for these particular groups at the elementary level, and I think that will help us keep better tabs on what's actually remaining and unencumbered and what's encumbered to be spent on something.
But we don't know how it's determined, how that money's going to be put towards this year's field trip. I mean, Bretton Woods has 11,000.
I'd have to check with each group and see how much is been collected for the fifth grade trip this year and how much.
We can certainly get that information to you. It's planned expenses, most of it. Bretton Woods has a higher enrollment than Forest Brook, so I would anticipate they would have more money in that because of the numbers of students that they're serving. So certainly we can get a...
I'm just concerned going into next year, we're going to see another $9,000 in that balance. You know?
I don't believe you're going to be seeing...
The plan is for each group to submit a plan to the board about how they plan to spend this money down so that we don't have this continue.
And do we know when that's going to be? The date?
As I said, it's going to be sometime in the spring. My best guess would be around late May. We'll see that. And that would be for the next school year, 15-16.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Okay, would the record show that the yes? Abstain. 4 in favor, 1 abstention, and Mr. Scarito is absent. Okay, moving on to 7482, ID Business Management. Have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Kylie, second. Thank you, Ms. Macaluso. Any discussion? Mr. Kylie?
The cost, I know it was told us that we need staff for this. Now, packet that we want to hire staff for this ID business management course? No?
You may be thinking of cosmetology, but we
No.
have 3 business education teachers at the high school, and next year our plan would be to maintain 3 business education teachers.
I read that it requires staff.
Well, it could be because it anticipates, yes, that we would need a certain number, percent of teacher, like a section or 2 sections of teaching, but that means that there's something else that the person would be moving from. It's not hiring an additional
Oh,
person.
I took it like we were hiring.
Yeah, it's
All
not,
right.
yeah.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? 5, 4, 1 abstention, and again, Mr. Scarito. 5, 0.
5-0, so 5-0-1.
Okay, next item, 7483, cosmetology. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Kylie, second. Mr. Kraft, discussion? Mr. Kylie?
The cost savings to the district. That's all I want to know. Us holding cosmetology here compared to going to BOCES. Through BOCES.
Actually, we don't have those exact numbers with us tonight.
So,
Do we?
no, where there would end up being a cost savings would be on the number of students who participate. So, having this program in district, it would be an 11 student enrollment, would be an equalization of sending out and having it. We did the survey, and I know in the update, you saw the numbers of interest. So it would be our hope to grow the program, utilize some funds that we have for the construction of the room, and then have kids who would be at the CTE center taking it in district where we need 11 students to break even.
And just to go a little bit further, cosmetology years ago was the most requested CTE course in our district. In order to get a full license for cosmetology, it's a 2-year program. We're sending students to BOCES just for 1 year. and if they want to get their license, they take the second year after graduation at their own expense. That being said, we know the interest that's there. In order to ascertain the interest, Linda Carmen's with us tonight. She sent out a survey, which I sent home to the board, of 9th and 10th grade students, and you can see the high interest in this. 79 students in our 10th grade said they would have an interest in it, and 93 in 9th grade. That doesn't mean they would all enroll in the program because it's a 2-year commitment. But what we're trying to do is plan for what we believe, and I spoke about this at a board meeting, the Board of Regents will be voting on in January, and that is that students will have the option of, in the 5 regions that they take, we know there's English, science, social study, 2 social studies, and math. If you remember, I spoke about the fact that instead of 2 social studies, our students will be able to substitute a CTE credit for that. That's what this would be. So our students would be able to access an area of interest for career development rather than taking the 2 social studies regions.
My whole thing with stuttering it is by us voting yes on going forward with the cosmetology, just to convey to the community how it's going to cost, it's going to save the district money by not funding it to those things. That's why I really, before saying yes to this,
It will do 2 things. As Mr. Eschbach said, 11 students is the break-even point for it, but we'll be able to service far more students because it's right here in district than sending them out for a half-day program for a year plus transportation.
And it would be the opportunity to offer the 2-year certification program, where right now we only offer the 1 year.
we don't have any school districts offer this in-house. Other than, do we know how many other school districts, surrounding school districts, that offer it in-house?
I don't know specifically, except I believe William Floyd is one of the school districts. William Floyd, if you may have read in Newsday, I guess 2 years ago, really started, because they're a 10,000 student district, to develop an extensive CTE set of programs that they're bringing in district for the very reason we're interested in doing it. If we can provide the opportunity for more kids at a more reasonable cost, then it seems that that's what we should be doing. So I do know William Floyd, but beyond that, I'm not sure which other districts.
So I can add to that. One of the reasons it's kind of new for a district like ours is that the state just passed laws that allow us to hire teachers from BOCES into our district, and they are considered CTE certified, and we can certify the program. Before, you weren't able to do that. So districts of our size who couldn't run a program like the William Floyd because of enrollment now have the opportunity to utilize a teacher without having to certify the program. It comes certified because it's going through the BOCES.
And to further respond to your question, just a reminder that if the board approves this as something that we place in our high school catalog for the students to select, the money for the studio would be grant money that Senator Flanagan gave us last June, which is a one-time expense money. Once we spend it, it's not a renewable thing, but you may remember he gave us $100,000. So we would be using that money to develop the studio we need in the classroom.
Do you know how much it's going to cost to renovate? We're not going to go over the 100,000.
Yeah, we'll be on it.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Okay, moving on to 7-4.
7-0 or 6-0?
Oh, I'm sorry. Moving on to 7-4B, new textbook adoption. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Garrido. Second, Mr. Kylie, thank you. Discussion? Mrs. Garrido?
I have a quick question, I'm sure it's going to be answered quickly. It says the cost through full, that is $110, Mrs. Fritz, and junior course is $82.50. Do we get a savings because we buy a certain number of books now, or is that doesn't explain that? Shows you two costs, it doesn't say why.
You know, I would have to check why there's separate costs there. It could be because of buying 30 or through where we're purchasing it from. So I can send you that.
Yeah, just, because there's a difference in $18,
Any other questions? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, moving on to 7-4D, 1, 2, and 4. Taking 3 separately. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Thank you, Mr. Kylie. Discussion. Mr. Scarito.
Mrs. Chris, I did get your questionnaire, and I understood that this was a type B or something for student enrichment. That's fantastic. My question arises from the number of chaperones. It just seems to vary so much. I'll give you an example. On the Rochester Convention, where they are staying overnight, I believe, a couple nights, we have 20 children, 2 chaperones. The National Cheerleading, we have 17 children, 4 chaperones. So I'm just, and then when we have Farmers Museum, which is an overnight trip, again, 8 children, 3 chaperones. So I thought there was a number that like you had to have 1 chaperone for 8 students. Or when I originally asked that question months back, there was a number to it. I'm just confused.
I'll let Mr. Eschbach explain further. We do have guidelines. They
Yes.
definitely are guidelines. Sometimes they're altered somewhat because sometimes our guidelines, when we have teams that are mixed male-female,
Sure.
we may send an additional chaperone because we make sure to send, if we can, a male and a female chaperone, so that will change the ratio. The cheerleading one in Florida is, for all intents and purposes, could be the very last year it's being run, because this was an experience that the students really raised monies on their own, because if you remember, they were not a acknowledged varsity sport in the state of New York until, actually they won't be until January. So it would seem to me that they might require more chaperones because of the kind of activity it is, where they are in an amusement park,
And then the
like
question-
Disney, and the kids have a lot more leverage when they're not performing to go out and about. But other than that, I don't.
Yeah, so there are guidelines, and for this age trip, there's a 15-to-1 ratio, but it's also dependent on the kind of experience. So for example, the Cooperstown trip, which is D1, there, the director is going, the National History Day liaison, and then there's also a chaperone, because there may be judging going on, and then there needs to be supervision of the kids, and there's also professional development activities that the teachers who chaperone participate in, so while one's in a development activity, the other may be with chaperoning students. So, and then the one for Rochester is 20 students, and it's a 15-1 ratio, so it breaks 15, so it would be 2 people.
I was using that as my bar, and that's when I got the other 2 numbers.
And then something for like the cheerleading, there may be 4 chaperones listed, but it could be a coach, an assistant coach, and then additional chaperones depending on where rehearsals are, transportation between events, and that particular event may need more chaperones because of logistics.
Mr. Eschbach, as far as this cost of district none for cheerleading, but who pays the chaperone?
So the chaperones do not get paid, so if they go on a work day,
Okay.
they're getting paid for work and no cost. They fundraise the entire trip. And chaperones never get paid. So a teacher who goes on a trip
Right.
never receives additional funds other than their salary for being a teacher. So if it runs over a weekend, that's gratis on them. If it's at nighttime, it's part of their chaperone responsibility, so nobody makes extra money for chaperoning.
And then the last question, Mrs. Christman had sent us the package of overnight field trip requests comparing with others. Only 2, the National History Day, I apologize, it's both National History Day, for April 26th and 27th, and June 14th to 18th for this coming year in 2015. It's got meals, which makes sense. but it's the only ones that include souvenirs.
I think that's written there.
That's student expense.
Yeah, that's a student
That's
expense.
student
That's
expense.
written there by the person who put it in, the teacher who put it in, said if kids want money for
I think they're just
souvenirs.
recommending an amount of money for
Okay.
students to carry.
Yes.
No, it was, I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Macaluso?
With regard to thank you, the two History Day competition trips, those are with regard to classroom activities or club activities?
So again, being a B-type field trip, there's a gray area and overlap because the National History Day project and papers are a class assignment, but the competition is something that's in addition to. So they're not a type C trip, which means they're going to get a grade for being at the nationals or they're going to get a grade at the states. But they did get a grade on the project they completed in school and then have the ability to participate.
So it was something that was initiated in the class?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
So if we were to not approve that, then those students that wrote the papers or did the presentations would have no chance of any acknowledgement at either the local or the state level. Is that correct? If they did
Right.
not?
Because it wouldn't be submitted and they wouldn't be able to go compete. And a part of these later competitions is actually an oral presentation.
Yep.
So they would need to be
They
present.
need to be interviewed, right?
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any, all in favor? Would show that the motion passes 6-0-0-1. Okay, the last item, 7-4-D3. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Macaluso, second.
Second.
Discussion. Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 5-1-0-1. That is the end of the consent agenda. Thank you. And Mr. Borchet.
Moving to committee reports, starting with the policy committee. The policy committee met about a week and a half ago. We are presenting 5 policies for first reading today, as well as 1 for adoption. Our next meeting is in the beginning of January. The audit committee, anything to report, Mr. Kiley?
Nothing new.
When's your next meeting?
Sometime in January.
District steering committee, nothing has happened since our last meeting. I believe our second meeting of the year is scheduled for March. HIV/AIDS committee, Mr. Kraft, anything to report?
Nothing. The meeting's going to be in February.
Thank you. Code of conduct, Mr. Scarito. We'll bounce that one for now. Distinguished alumni committee, Ms. Macaluso.
That's a high school committee, not one.
Safety committee,
Yes, the safety committee meeting for December has been postponed to January. James, sir?
and the advocacy committee, Mr. Kiley, anything new? Okay. Moving to number 9 on the agenda, policies. This is the first reading of A through F. A, I believe, was removed from the agenda. Going to B, 5100. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, moving to C, 5150.
Can I go back?
You can go back to 5100.
5100, on the first page, under notice, second bullet, parents will receive a plain language summary of this policy by mail within the school calendar. So we're no longer going to send a separate, actual piece of paper that says it'll just be in the school calendar.
Yes, and I believe, is it in the student handbook as well?
Well, it
The
says
summary.
before that, but,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So only if you get the school calendar will you be seeing it, and there are people who do not get the school calendar.
Well,
It doesn't, not on purpose.
right, I was gonna say, they should, we need to know about those people, because we do mail that to the entire community, which is why it's a good vehicle to notify everyone.
Okay. And also on 5100, if I can continue, general procedures, data collection, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet. Attendance data will be analyzed periodically to identify patterns or trends in student absences. Who does that analysis? I'm just curious, should we put it in the policy?
No, I think that if that goes anywhere, it would go in a regulation.
Okay. And then on the next page, under attendance grade policy, the second paragraph, students are expected to attend all scheduled classes consistent with the importance of classroom participation. Unexcused absences, we changed it from will to may affect a student's class participation grade for the marking difference. There's a big difference in my eyes between may and will. Is there any reason for that?
Yeah, could you tell me which page you're on?
I'm on the, I guess it would be considered the 1 to 3rd page. At the bottom of that 3rd page. That's a big difference. We went from your grade is going to be affected by not attending classes, and now it may be affected.
Linda, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. The reason why that shift was made is because it depends on the teacher and their grading policy. So the participation grade in one class may exist, but then in another class they're using a different framework. So because it's not consistent in the way a teacher or in the way a department grades, may make more sense.
Okay. And then if you go to the denial of high school credit for not meeting minimum attendance standards, you go from the same word may, courses taken for high school credit in which student fails to achieve 90% attendance may be subject to the denial of credit. And then at the next sentence says the total number of unexcused absences shall result in denial of credit. So, in other words, it may be subject or it shall be. Am I right in saying that that's contradictory in that paragraph? No? Do you want this one to look at?
Yes, I can answer that.
Go ahead.
The first line where it says may
Yeah.
have an impact. If a student has an unexcused absence and then the parent provides us with medical notes, or the parent has an explanation under the appeal process that the absences were actually excused, it's taken off. Once you do get to 18 unexcused absences, that's where there is credit denial. And it really is more of a reflection of what we actually do than the previous policy.
Okay. And on the very last page of this, the first paragraph there is the sentence begins on the page before. The committee would then rule on whether the student will continue with the opportunity to receive course credit or be placed on denial of credit status. That's, in other words, it's not considered audit anymore.
Linda will explain what it was causing us.
Audit causes some concern through, it sits on the transcript.
Oh, okay.
And the interpretation by some other colleges in regard to audit is that the child sat in the class for no grade, because that is the standard definition of audit at the college level. So we needed to make that distinction. Even though it was made in our profile, I was getting phone calls asking me that. So we decided it was best to make a distinction, a clear distinction.
Thank you.
Anything further on 5100 from the board? 5100 will be sent back to committee for proposed second reading. 5152, which is 9C. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, 5152 will be sent back to committee for proposed second reading. D is 5152.1. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, that will be sent back to policy committee for second reading. 5410. Any comment from the board? Mr. Carappa?
With the concussions, it says in certain instances they have to be cleared by a neurosurgeon. Does it have to be a neurosurgeon or could be a neurologist as well? Have you ever-
Where are you, specifically in the policy, where are you?
Last page, when you look at the grid, first, second, third. concussion.
Yeah, that's all stricken. That's no longer part of the policy.
On the last page, it says,
Yeah, it's not crossed out because of the formatting. The way it's in there, it's not by text, it's a picture. And the way we format the policies, you're unable to strike through the picture. So theoretically, there should have just been a big X through it like that. Mr. Carappa?
Okay.
Okay.
So where is it in the policy then about clearance to come back?
What the policy and what we thought appropriate was those types of decisions are going to be determined by the concussion management team. They'll come up with the protocols in conjunction with the members of those teams, which include a doctor, which include, I think, a nurse, some coaches, and some others. They're going to come forward with protocols for returning to action, monitoring, so on and so forth.
You know, I noticed on that team, they have the district physician,
Yes,
who is a primary care internal medicine doctor.
yes.
Should we specify the neurologist should be on that team to make these decisions? Seems more appropriate. I can tell you my own practice, I don't clear people to go back, I send them to a neurologist.
But I don't think that this person
So-
clears he or she doesn't clear the people. They're part of the team that sets the guidelines for what we're going to use. And it could be that in the guidelines it says the student has to go to a neurologist and receive X, Y, Z.
So that-
Mr. Kraft, is your opinion that a neurologist should be on the team in general, or you just want a neurologist to be the one to clear the student
I
eventually?
just think if they go, you know, if they follow the old guidelines, it doesn't have to be a neurosurgeon, it could be referred to a neurologist as
Right.
well. But when they make the guidelines, I'm assuming we're going to review it.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Macaluso.
What role did impact have? All I know is that we participated and had something in perpetuity. What was it?
We still participate with Impact, and that's where our school physician is Impact certified, where they can review the precognitive test data, which is the test that's given before any kind of head injury occurs, and then review it with the student after the injury or the injury occurs to see if there was a traumatic injury or even a concussion. So we found that the physicians that are getting Impact certified are very up to date with return to play protocol and taking time to return a student back to action. So we still currently do it for free.
So any school physician that we have will get that certification or that training?
Our current school physician has it. Dr. Belding is Impact certified.
If we get a new one, the same thing would apply? It would be,
We
We
request.
recommend it.
okay.
Anything else on 5410? Very well, that will be sent. Yes.
And actually, you know, maybe we should take that suggestion and write in there with the district's physician who's on this team. We could put in an impact certified district physician. So that,
I don't know anything about impact. I don't know the quality of that program. I'm a little leery putting in policy, but this is something we could take back to the committee. I don't think we need to make a decision on it right now.
It's not going to RFP for the position.
I was going to say, it might be more appropriate when we put out an RFP for districts, positions, to include that in the qualifications or whatever programs and certifications we want them to have when we go about and hire them, rather than be in the policy.
Very good. Anything further on
but
50?
then,
Yes,
and
Ms.
just
Mass.
to follow up on that question, then how do you memorialize the fact that the RFP has to have that in it without the policy having it?
Memorialize it in terms of board policy, well, it wouldn't be.
No, it would just, to answer the question, you probably don't have 100% certainty, but when we pull out an RFP that we've sent before, we tend to use it as a template to send out the next one. I mean, if you had it in policy that it had to be an impact certified, my only question would be, and you might know this better, Larry, than I, in a year or 2 years, is there going to be another thing that comes out that physicians use that's not the impact that they use for return to play guidelines, and then our policy has impact control. So
However, and in all fairness, a policy, if that guideline changes, I understand why you don't want to put specific language in, but at the same, because things change very rapidly, and so therefore it makes our policies out of date very quickly when you don't have specific language. But to me, the only way you can memorialize that the board would like an impact certified doctor to be part of the RFP if it's in a policy, until it changes.
Anything further on 5410? Thank you. 5410 will be sent back to committee for proposed second reading. F, 5421, the EpiPen policy. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, 5421 will be sent back to committee for proposed second reading. G, 9G on the agenda is the adoption of the student wellness policy. Mr. Tasman, there was a recent change or amendment to that policy today?
Yes,
Can you just go over that really quick?
Yes, on the second page, C, letter C, numbers 4 and 5, which give specific detail regarding beverages and snacks. I'd like to have that removed. That criteria it's old New York State criteria that is no longer in line with the federal guidelines.
Specifically, where are you? You're on the second page.
Second page, C, 4 and 5.
C, 4 and 5, got it.
And then all these start under the asterisk.
Yes, and the asterisks, because in number 1, it covers all the food and beverages, and it states that the nutritional standards set forth in the federal regulations.
So C should only be 1, 2, and 3. Everything under that, right up until Roman numeral 2, should be stricken, in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. So on the agenda, 9G 5405, I will make a motion to adopt 5405 with 3 and 4, and the asterisk material stricken under 4 and 5, sorry, under letter C on the second page. Do I have a second? Thank you. Any discussion? Ms. Mass?
I have a question that this policy brings up, which would be on page 1, 2, 3, the 4th page, the recess. One of the things it says there on number 2, B, recess, number 2, recess opportunities shall not be used for disciplinary purposes unless related directly to health and safety issues. And that brings in mind, as I'm sure Mrs. Chris knows where I'm going, the ZAP program. That, in other words, at the 6th grade ZAP program, do we still utilize that program?
Do we still utilize that?
I don't believe we do.
I thought we stopped.
Zeros are, we don't utilize
We
that
don't use
program?
that.
No, it's supervised study learning.
Right.
It's not ZAP.
It's not ZAP, however, is recess still used? If you don't do your homework in 6th grade, that was the ZAP program. But now, is recess still utilized? If you don't do your homework, is recess still utilized as a time for the kids to do their homework? The teacher's mandate. The kids can do what they want.
In part 1 of the recess, it says all elementary school students, 6th grade is middle school.
6th grade is elementary, I believe, as a part of New York State, right?
Well, it depends on where it's housed, because this is saying elementary school students. So students who are in elementary schools. The 6th graders are in a middle school. So they're treated as a secondary student.
Zach brings up a very, philosophical question on that. In other words, we don't always.
Because we provide recess for 6, 7, and 8.
Okay.
And I think the other thing that it raises, and maybe it's the language of what we have, it says for disciplinary purposes, a supervised study hall may not be punitive in nature necessarily.
I believe I'm talking about the ZAP program, so that's very different, because that was one of the components of the ZAP program that said it was utilized as a consequence, and the
You are
word
correct.
consequence, to me, meant punitive.
It absolutely did.
Right.
When the board raised that as an issue, we explored it, and as Salaveri said, it's not in that form anymore.
Oh, that's good to
Yeah,
know.
that was
It's
really.
been zapped.
Oh, good to know that ZAP has been zapped.
Any further discussion on 9G? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 601. Moving on to correspondence. List of correspondence will be located on the table in the binder. Discussion matters, facilities report.
I asked to have this on the agenda because I believe that the administration needs some guidance from the school board. I'm not exactly sure how you want to go about this discussion, but as you know, we had a committee that worked for a year. Mr. Stuccio presented the report to the board. It included a little over $19 million worth of recommended work to be done in the district. And we need direction as to whether the board is interested in having all of this work completed, whether they want to discuss it in part, whether they want the work to be included in a potential bond to be sent, to be forwarded to the community, and in essence, where are we going with the report, and how do we want to handle the recommended projects that are in it?
I think that the attempt to tackle that is going to be a big one. My suggestion would be that we set a special meeting sometime in January, early January. When is our, January 10th, which is a when? No, it's just a Saturday.
Isn't
Not a
that
retreat,
meeting?
it's a special meeting, our special meeting.
The following Wednesday is what date? 15th? 14th? Okay. I'm going to call a special meeting on January 14th at 7 o'clock. If that date is not convenient, we'll amend it. But I want to get it on the calendar, so at least we have a control date where we can move on it. So January 14th, 7 o'clock in this building will be a special meeting to discuss the facilities report and how we want to go about tackling the issues in that report. Anything further from the board? That would be the 12th. Okay, so we're going to make it the 12th. We're going to keep it as the 12th for now. If anyone has a problem with it, email me after, and if a significant number of us aren't going to be there, we'll push it. So it's 1/12, 7 p.m. in this building. Celeste, please don't send the notice out until we confirm that we're going to use that date. We have some time for that. With that said, anything further on the facilities report? Very well. New business. Do any members of the board have new business they'd like to bring up? Mr. Scarito?
I wanted to thank the administration for getting us a copy of the Whippoorwill operating costs. If I understand the report correctly, we lose about $200,000 a year with the building open. Am I reading the numbers right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was like 187 or 194, but yeah, a little under 200.
187,
I have good memory. Yeah, so it's costing, after, when we take all the expenses and we subtract the rent we received for this building, what's left over, our net cost is $187,000 per year.
And that's not including, James, the $1.2 million we're we're spending on the windows, the boilers, the roof, and the parking lot that needs attention.
Well, yeah, as we had mentioned when we sent this out, these are the annual operating costs of the building, and they do not include any capital improvements. So these are repairs are included, but not capital projects. So repairing the boiler is included, but not replacing the boiler. Patching a hole in the parking lot is included, but not replacing the parking lot.
Since we're going to have that discussion on the facilities thing,
Yes.
because every 5 years we're losing close to $1 million before we need the capital expenses. This plays a lot into that $19 million.
Yeah, I would think that that report was timely and that it will serve as discussion on the 12th. Anything further on that issue, new business? Any other new business, Ms. Macaluso?
I just want to take the opportunity to thank the community for their support over the last 3.5 years of my husband's battle with cancer and his death on the 12th of November. The support from this community and the people that I've had the privilege of serving on this board with goes beyond what I could have even have imagined. My daughters and my son were involved in school, track, lacrosse. The girls' soccer team were so incredibly supportive. The teachers from Forest Brook who wrote notes to my children, telling them about what they remembered about them being in class and offering continuous support for them. HDA, HAP, HDAA, the PTA, security, buildings and grounds. I had a former teacher who I had in 1977 to 81 who came to support me. Describes the type of staff we have here. When teachers support you when you're in your 50s, says a lot about the quality of people that work in this district. And to not acknowledge the former members of this board that I served with, who bought pillows for my guests, who had a lawn service to do my lawn, who cooked for my guests, and who were at every night of the wake, standing in the corners, and every time I would look would just wave, bringing me water, and anything I needed. I knew no matter how badly I felt I was going to hit the floor, I knew it wasn't going to happen because I was so supported and held up. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank this community for everything you have done for me and for my children, and I will forever be thankful to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business from any members of the board? Any new business from administration? Questions or comments from the community? Seeing none. Do we have any matters to go back and use that from? Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion for an adjournment. Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Thank you, Mr. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Our next meeting will be a business meeting on January 13th, 2015, right here, 7 p.m. executive session. Thank you.